All right, so we are here. This is an unnumbered episode.
56.
Is it going to be
Episode 56?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
It is. And just, are we recording? Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm your co-host, Ken Conti. This is the Yoga Pod podcast. We are here with Rob Loud, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I
This
just
is
want to
Rob.
make
Hey,
sure
Rob.
I'm right. And I know that we were excited to get you scheduled on and everything. I think we're going to let Maj-Lis and Jana introduce themselves real quick.
My name is Maj-Lis Delgado. My husband and I are the local owners of Yoga Pod Fort Collins. And my name is Jana, and I am the Dwight to Maj-Lis's Michael Scott, assistant to the regional manager.
Not the assistant region manager, but the assistant too.
Assistant to the
Jana
regional.
is so much more than that.
She's the wind beneath your wings.
True story.
Yep.
Very true.
Big shoes.
Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rob Loud. Yeah, last name, you got it right. I've been teaching for the Yoga Pod for, I think, just about 10 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, just really happy to be on. I know we tried to get this happening once before, but yeah, glad we got it so we can do this more remotely now. Makes it much easier. So
it is. The world is
Sure.
our oyster using technology.
yes, it is
Cool.
Mercury retrograde though, so you never know what's going to happen before the end.
True. So Rob, 10 years at YogaPod, that's incredible. And I want to rewind a little bit I want to hear about your time at YogaPod, but I want to hear about where did you grow up and then how did you find yoga in the first place?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a little bit of a sordid story, but yeah, I grew up in Boulder. So I was born in Boston in 1972 and moved to Boulder in 1976. So my mom picked up me and my younger sister and kind of bounced. She was one of 9 in a big Catholic family. All of her brothers and sisters are still out in the East Coast in the Boston area, but she took me and my sister here, and I've been here ever since. So I've been in Boulder pretty much my whole life. And yeah, great place to live. Not without, paradise is kind of in the eye of the beholder, not to say I didn't get into a lot of trouble growing up. My mom she was a single mom, and I have 2 additional sisters that were born from a second marriage. They're twins, and they're also, all 3 of my sisters are here. But yeah, just sort of grew up, not a lot of money. She was a little single mom trying to raise all 3 kids. And so I didn't have a lot of guidance, I guess, growing up. I didn't have necessarily the best father figures, and kind of was left to my own devices on some level at a pretty young age. So
did your mom work full time?
She did work full time. I mean,
what did she do?
She was just administrative assistant to different, she was always doing just assistant to somebody at a company. She was good at typing, and she had all of those sort of managerial skills. So that's basically what she did her entire life. She didn't go to college, and yeah, so she really just did the best that she could. She was trying hard. She had her own issues with alcohol growing up, and there was a lot of just the best way I could say it was I was sort of left to my own devices. And kind of early on in my teenage years, 13, 14, I just kind of just ran a little bit amok for a while. I just, I did graduate from high school and all of that, but just got into a lot of trouble. I was, kind of, I guess, growing up a little bit angry and a little bit jaded. And I think at the core of why I teach yoga, that's the start of it right there, was just growing up and immediately finding for myself drugs and alcohol, and kind of was off to the races from a young age. And
do you think you were influenced by like a group of friends, or were you like seeking that out because of
I mean, I had a tight little crew of friends, and we all were just kind of like misfits on some level, like at Fairview High School in Boulder, they had on the side of the school Cancer Hill, where all the kids would go out and smoke. And it was kind of like that crew, a little bit more of the stoner, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, crew. But I mean, we just, the crew that I ran around with, we all just had a lot of freedom, and were able to, not come home at night if we didn't want to. We had, we could just call and say we were sleeping at somebody's house, and, just kind of running around like that. And, and I guess there's a couple major life happenings, things that happened to me in my life that made me, sort of change the trajectory of what I was doing. And I did go to college as well. Went to Metro in Denver, Front Range, and CU. And my mom kind of made me go to college. I didn't want to go, but she's like, "You're going." And
did you
went
pick
to
a
college.
major?
What's that?
Did you pick a major, or were you just
Well, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I started with a business major. I was like, this is just what people do, I guess, And I had like a mini meltdown going into year 3 at Metro, and just dropped all of my classes, and kind of had to try to figure it out again. I took a couple years off, and then went to Front Range, and I ended up with an environmental studies degree that I did absolutely nothing with. I kind of wish I would have known I was going to do, a teacher training, and this was going to be my life, because I probably wouldn't have gone to 6 years of college, but I don't regret it, but yeah, it was, I always struggled a little bit, I guess, with addiction, or I would say a lot, actually. And I guess it was about 97. So there's 2 major happenings that sort of started to change my trajectory towards trying to, help myself a little bit more. And one was, I got assaulted on the hill. So on CU on the hill on campus, kind of went to a party, and I nearly got killed. This guy just kind of jumped me in the alley when I was trying to make my way home, and
unprovoked. He just saw you and rolled up on you.
Yeah, and it was really, really I got very lucky. I think I had some sort of guardian angel. But I mean, the long story short, he kicked me and stomped me in my head about, I guess, a witness from afar said maybe 10 to 12 times, and
Whoa.
I was unconscious after the first kick. And so he was just laying into me. And is this all right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this is what people, they want to hear that.
But anyways, I was
yoga's
out.
for everyone.
There's a few people that I think saw from afar. Nobody was right there, but just so happened that a police cruiser was coming down the alley, just patrolling, didn't even get called, and actually drove up on the guy mid-swing with his foot in my face. And kid ran, and cops chased him. He fought with the cops. He went to jail. I was just a mess. It took me months and months to recover from this. I had lots of broken bones in my face. I couldn't see. When they picked me up, I was like, they said I was barely breathing. And
you were like 25 at this point.
I think I was 26 or 27.
Okay.
Good math, Ken. Look at you.
He remembers the
Following
date
the
of birth.
story.
Well, he was born the same year I was. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
Look at you two,
Yeah.
silver foxes.
Hey, what?
That's a good thing.
Oh, okay.
Ken doesn't think
Yeah.
he's silver.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I
So
definitely-
what was that recovery like for you? Was there tools that you were using to recover, or emotionally?
Well,
I mean, assuming you were dealing with just that trauma of like, how could somebody,
Yeah.
do this
Yeah.
to me?
It was, on some level, it was like a little bit humiliating, because I thought I thought I was capable of defending myself. At that point in my life, I was a bigger guy. I weighed a lot more, and I just felt like, on some level, just a little tougher than that, but also like, you know, it was just, yeah, I mean, I had a severe concussion. And so there was just a lot of just like getting my speech back, like back to normal. My brain was kind of working faster than the words would come out of my mouth, and had to take a bunch of time off of work. And, you know, ultimately I didn't know anything about, you know, PTSD, or I didn't know any, you know, I'm just out of the loop of anything sort of health and wellness at that point in my life. Um, and yeah, so it was just a long, slow process. And basically this kid went to jail for quite some time. It was a big court case. And after that all kind of fell by the wayside, I just realized I had to stop drinking alcohol, because really at the root of what happened, you know, was that I was not paying attention. I was intoxicated, and, you know, everything in my life was just like that. And I think after it happened, for a little while, I started to kind of dive deeper into it. I was just trying to sort of numb myself out. And it really came to a head where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so I, you know, I might have been, yeah, I think I called my mom to help me. You know, I was like, I need some help. I'm like struggling over here. And her husband came over, her husband at the time, which was her third husband, who's actually a really great guy. I'm still friends with him. He's still part of the family, even though my mom has passed away and they had gotten divorced. But he picked me up, and like, I was just I was just a mess. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Drove me to AA, and I was like, I don't even know what's going on right now. Like, and he basically just pushed me out of the car and was like, you're going in here and you're going to have to find your own way home. And I was like, what? And then that was the beginning. So that's when I basically was like, all right, I'm going to stop. And I did for about 7 years. And during that time I picked up Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So that was sort of my first, that was kind of, I feel like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu got me ready for my yoga, you know, like I trained hard, just like I practice my practice with yoga. I was that dedicated to it for about 7 years. And really it was because I needed an outlet. It was really like I needed something physical to do, but also it was like I really just wanted to never have that happen again. I wanted to be able to know for certain that I would be able to handle myself if something came up. And so I trained, and it was a great community. The community of those guys are like very much like yogis, you know, they're all working on themselves. There's lots of parallels other than the punching, kicking, and choking each other. But like that is all, you know, and it's adults doing it, and everybody's you would be amazed at how kind these people are, you know. And they kind of took me in, and one guy in particular really just like worked with me one-on-one. And so I did that for like about 7 years. And then
Rob, we just took a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class.
Oh, did you?
Because we have some members that manage and own this studio, and they've been coming to yoga because they saw it would benefit their body. And I was really surprised taking the class. I loved just the like focus of it's like avoiding conflict first. It's like nonviolence, just like yoga. You know, you're holding your hands clasped, not in fists, you know. Yeah. That rear naked chokehold, that's intense. That's no joke.
No joke.
That's no joke. And
it works.
Yeah.
Number one in self-defense is just awareness, being aware of your surroundings, and being, you know, knowing, not getting, like you said, not getting yourself into the situation to begin with is step one. And then from there, you know, but yeah, I have nothing but love and respect for those guys. And I see jiu-jitsu guys come into my classes all the time because flexibility is huge there, you know. Like I wish I was as flexible back then as I am now, because I probably would have been a terror, you know. I was so flexible at that time. But I did a little competing, and then, you know, I'll just kind of fast forward a little bit. Went to Thailand for about 6 months, and I was with the intent to just train there, because I was also doing Muay Thai, which is, you know, Thai boxing, and they kind of go hand in hand, jiu-jitsu and Thai boxing. And got on the plane. It was first time ever really leaving, you know, for an extended period. I've been in Boulder my whole life, and super exciting, but got on the plane, and when I was on the plane, I was like, you know, this is a long flight, and very just lapse in judgment. I was like, maybe I should have a beer, you know, and this is like 7 years in flying
Wow.
Thailand, and I did. And, you know, by the time I got to Bangkok, I was like, not that great. I was like, oh crap, like trying to navigate Bangkok like that. And, but anyways, I kept it kind of in check while I was there. I was like, all right, it's okay, you know, just a little bit. You know, I met people. It was just kind of came with the program, but I trained pretty much every day while I was there. So I kind of had to be a little bit on point. You know, you have to run and jump rope and box, and, you know, you can't just be hungover doing that. And so, but when I came back 6 months later, I started to just fall back into my old patterns a little bit. And this is kind of around the time when I started dabbling in yoga, when I first took like my first yoga class. But when I came,
why did you take that first class? Like what made you say I need to take
what
it?
made me do it was because I was having fairly regular panic attacks every day, like pretty daily. I was often depressed. I had a lot of anxiety, and, you know, I'm not 100% certain, but a lot of it had to do probably with just unresolved trauma from getting kicked in the head. And not just that, just growing up, you know, like just traumatized as a kid, you know, like, cause a lot of stuff, I saw a lot of stuff too growing up that was just like, ugh, you know, like kids should not have to see this, you know? And, so anyways, I was just like, well, if there's something that might help, you know, I went to the doctors, I went to the hospital quite a few times having panic attacks, thinking I was going to like die. And basically when I would walk into the hospital and I go to the desk, they basically say, you're not breathing, breathe. And cause I was like, I'm dying. I feel like I'm dying. And I would just get upset. They'd be like, breathe. And I'm like, I'm fucking breathing. If I wasn't breathing, I would be dead. Like, and they probably knew I was going to be all right. I didn't know I was going to be all right, you know? And so I was on all these medications for a while. I was on some pretty heavy drugs, sedatives, to kind of just keep myself, you know, in somewhat regulated, because I was just kind of spiraling a little bit. And so there was a doctor once that said, a few years back, that had said, it was a holistic doctor. I went to him looking for drugs. I was like, I need some prescriptions for some antidepressants or whatever. And he's like, he was really reluctant. He did, because I think he knows it's the lesser of two evils, but he said, you really need to do yoga. And I was like, what the hell are you talking? You don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I was just like, yoga was the farthest thing from my mind. You know, it was like literally pretty far out there that I would even, I was like, you know, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but it kind of stuck with me. And so at the gym I worked out pretty regularly, and there was a yoga class that was downstairs, and I tried it on, and it just, my first class just kicked my ass. Like, I was like, oh my God, I thought I was strong, and I thought this and that. And I was like, I was panting. I just felt like I was dying in there. But when it was all said and done, I was like, wow, that was kind of like in Shavasana. Then my first Shavasana, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is the most at peace I've felt probably ever in my life, if not years, you know? And so I kind of just started going back. Another thing, the teacher, he was an Ashtangi, and he was just this skinny guy, somebody that I wouldn't really like ever see myself talking to or hanging out with. And, you know, I looked at him and I was just like, this guy never gets road rage. I can tell this guy does not, like, and I was drawn to that. I was like, I need to like be around this guy more. Like, I just want to, by osmosis, try to get some of what he's got, you know? And so it was once a week. I went once a week it was like over a year. I was just practicing, and I could actually start to feel, I was like, well, you know, why do I feel so good? Why am I, you know, what's going on? I feel like halfway decent, you know? And so I upped it to 2 classes a week. And then, you know, the benefits just started I could tell that it was something that I needed to do. I was like, there's something to this. I don't know exactly what it is, but, and what it was just learning how to breathe. Like my goal when I first started taking this guy's class was to try to keep my breath matched with his breath. And it was impossible at first. I was like, there's no way. I'm like panting like a dog, just like, oh my God. And, but like learning to just slow my breath down and having the realization that one doctor said, you need yoga, that the ER nurses always said, you got to breathe, and it all kind of like, I was like, there's something to this. So I started going and going. And then at some point, I got off all the drugs that I was on. I was on quite a few of them. And that was a scary process, weaning yourself off of these things that like keep you safe and keep you regular. And
that was cold turkey. You just said, I'm done.
I kind of weaned myself off. And then I had one pill left and I kept it with me on me for like a year. And then finally I was like, I don't need this anymore. But, it was through this whole process. I'm like, I need to find a yoga studio. And this was in, I guess 2008 maybe. And then I walked into the Yoga Pod. I was like, all right, I'm going to just find a yoga studio and make this official, start to try to practice every day. And I did. And so I found the Yoga Pod and started practicing every day. And
who was your first class at Yoga Pod Boulder?
Whose was my first class?
Yeah, whose class did you take?
No, I can't even remember, but the very first owners of the Yoga Pod were a South African couple. So Andrew and Jessica, and they kind of like, they knew my issues. They knew that I was, had issues with addiction, and they were always just kind of had my back, But it was probably one of those two. But at the same time, Nicole and Jerry were like practicing there. Nicole was a teacher. Jerry, I think, was new to yoga. And we did some photo shoots and, I really just immersed myself in the community. I just started practicing every day. And then soon after I started practicing every day, unfortunately, big life event number 2 happened, and it also had to do with alcohol. And basically I found myself, I don't know, I think sometimes, sometimes things just have to get worse before they get better. I was kind of like just waffling through, and like, on some level, yoga, there's still a lot of unresolved issues. And anyways, I went down just a dark path for, a weekend, and it didn't turn out well. It didn't turn out well. So it was like, I just kind of holed myself up in my house. I was just like, kind of fuck the world. And I guess a few days in, I went to try to get a prescription filled at King Soopers. And it was early in the morning. I was still kind of drunk from the weekend, got in my car, started driving towards King Soopers, down Arapahoe. I don't know if you know Boulder, but I was on 6th and Arapahoe. King Soopers is at 30th and Arapahoe, so 30 blocks. And at about 28th Street, I passed out at the wheel and went through a red light and got into a car accident, and went to jail right there and then, and had to detox in jail. And that was that. I was like, crap, like I just lost my job. I was working as a valet at a hotel in Boulder, or at doorman. My girlfriend was like, she's out. She left. I had to basically move out of my apartment because I had like a month there, but like I just didn't have a job. So I ended up having to move in with my mom in Longmont. And so my whole life just changed right there. I was like, damn, I'm unemployed. I'm like how old was I now? I was like 35, maybe a little less than that, right around there, somewhere in my 30s. And I basically was on house arrest and had to wear an ankle monitor and had to find work. I didn't have work. So basically, long story short, I asked the sheriff's department, I was like, hey, while I'm looking for work, do you mind if I take a yoga class? Do you mind if I take a class while I'm job searching? And I very distinctly remember the guy's look on his face. He was like, well, yeah, he was kind of like, what the hell? And then he was like, I don't see why not. And so basically they knew that so then I started going back to yoga. So that was about 2 weeks before, I was practicing. The owners were kind of like, where'd Rob go? He just kind of goes, I was practicing every day and then I was gone. So yeah.
Were you taking yoga with your ankle bracelet on?
I was, and it was really, people were looking at me, the guy with all the tattoos, and I was probably about 40 or 50 pounds heavier than I am now, and had the ankle monitor. I know a few people who remember me back then were like, oh crap, we were like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to make me kind of feel normal. I know this. So I didn't really care. I mean, I was a little embarrassed at first, but I was like, if I have an opportunity to practice yoga, I'm just going to do it, And so I just was practicing. And then one day I was living at my mom's, and, it felt horrible at the time. I felt like I didn't have a lot going for me externally. Somebody from the outside looking in would say the same, but I was practicing so much, especially once the ankle monitor came off, that I literally felt better than I had ever felt in my life. I was like, man, I felt great, even though I was living at my mom's. I was a little embarrassing, but it turned out to be a really great blessing in disguise, being able to live with her for 9 months as an adult, because, like I said, she passed away a couple of years ago unexpectedly. And, so yeah, I was practicing and I overheard, you guys know Matt Capinas?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was one of my favorite teachers, and I was like fanboying or boy fanning him or whatever. And I overheard him talking about leading a teacher training. It was at Core Power, and I had never been to Core Power, but I was like, I just want to do this teacher training, this would be amazing if I could do this. A light bulb went off. I realized that if I could teach yoga, because I was looking for work, I was like, if I could teach, it's going to be win-win for everybody. It's going to hopefully hold me accountable to what I'm doing. I'll keep evolving. I'll have a job, this, that, and the other. And so I went home one day to my mom's house, and she was like, she could tell I had something on my mind, and like, what's up? And I was like, she was just amazed at how well I was doing. She was really worried about me for a while. And I was like, man, this guy Matt's doing a teacher training, yada, yada. And she just was like, I had no money. And she's just like, I'll give you the money to do this training if you promise me that you do something with it.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So she gave me the money, did the training with the intention of coming back to the Yoga Pod to teach there, which at that point in time, it was just one room. There wasn't even rooms 2 and 3. It was just one big room. And so I did the training, and I took about 4 months after the training with Matt, and Doris led it, Matt and Doris, and now Matt and Doris are married. Interesting little thing that kind of transpired later down the line. But and I lived I basically also overheard Matt overheard me say that I was looking for a place to live. I was ready to kind of fly the coop again. And he was like, I got a room for rent if you want to move in. And I was like, what? Dream come true. Like, cheap rent. And so I moved in with him. I lived with him for 7 years. And
Wow.
yeah. And basically went in and auditioned. Nicole and Jerry took me for a pre-audition at their house just to make sure I wasn't going to totally tank, because back then the auditions weren't just private. It was actually the 130 class that you went in and taught. It was it was a public class. So went in.
That's
and
crazy.
Yeah, and I guess I nailed it, even though I didn't feel like it. But lots of people showed up. All my favorite teachers were there to support me, and I just thought I was going to throw up, and I was like, man, this is crazy. And so I taught the class, got the job. They gave me the 6:30 a.m. on Friday mornings, and I rocked that for about, I don't know, 4 years or so, pretty regularly, even though I don't practice at that time. And then I just started branching out to different studios. And for a while I was teaching all over the place, and then kind of reeled it back in. And now I'm just at the Yoga Pod, and that's like the very abbreviated version. But that's kind of the long and the short of it, is really just, you know, for a lack of a better way to put it, the shitstorm of my life, the two worst things that happened to me in my life turned out to be like two of the greatest gifts for me, because for me, it's like, I have to learn the hard way. I need a cosmic 2x4 upside the head in order to actually start to get the lesson, you know? And so yeah, it was just like kind of a lot of trauma and a lot of just kind of nasty feeling stuff got me into teaching yoga. But I think that's probably true for most people. It's not necessarily, you know, getting kicked in the head and getting into a big car accident, but it's all the same thing. It's all suffering. People don't come to yoga because their life is A-okay and perfect. People come to yoga at bare minimum, you know, for body issues, or, you know, like, whatever it is. We're all here for the same reason, and that's to try to, you know, change our relationship, hopefully, with suffering, so that that's basically it, you know. It's just my life. And
when you were first taking yoga, were you just taking vinyasa classes?
When I started at the pod, no, I did everything. I did large, I'd say I did 75 to 80% flow. So yeah, and then about half and half, hot and yin. So I did hot and yin. I was doing all of it, and I was literally practicing, you know, 3 times a day. Sometimes I was just like, this is where I want to be, you know, and I was a karma yogi. So I not only helped at the desk and helped at the studio, but I went out and did flyering for the studio. I just had a trade membership before I was teaching, but I was I did a lot of forest yoga too. There was like some forest influence when I first got there. There's a teacher that was straight up Ashtanga. So I had sort of that. I feel like I had like a really great, especially at the start of the Yoga Pod, there were so many different styles that were like each teacher, and I think it's still kind of the same, but I was really able to experience a lot of different styles, you know, and I feel like it kind of shows in how I teach today. I kind of pull a little bit from any style, you know. I don't necessarily follow a specific lineage, but I try to teach my classes like I would like to be taught a class, you know. And that's kind of just a mixed bag. I take, you know, I notice cues from other people, and I'm like, oh, I remember that cue, you know, like people are like, oh, did you train with so-and-so? And I was like, no, but so-and-so trained with so-and-so, and I probably learned that from them, you know. And so I'd say a bulk of, you know, where I'm at now as a teacher is just trial and error, and just trying to pick up things that I learned from all the great teachers in and around Colorado. You know, there's so many great teachers here. So
many
yeah.
great teachers.
Sure.
So there's a common theme that we've had with several people on the podcast, my husband included, with, you know, suffering with addiction, and alcohol tends to be a primary source there. And then diving into a yoga practice, right? And kind of letting that supplement the addiction. And my husband, I think you guys asked him the same question, is like, do you feel like, you know, you needed to replace the alcohol with something, right? And he still openly admits that that's kind of where he is. Like, he still needs to take class once or twice a day to be able to move through that. And it seems to be, it's so common.
Yeah.
It's
well,
so
you know, yoga can be an addiction in and of itself, but you know, you gotta choose your addictions, because alcohol is a rough and hard way to go as far as, you know, being addicted to yoga. I definitely was addicted to yoga at the start. I feel like I still need to move my body. That's a big part of it, is having to do that. But My relationship has changed a little bit. I'm, you know, like, I'm okay when I don't practice, you know, I'm not like, my God, you know, that is, I know that that's my practice, and is not practicing or getting on my cushion and sitting, you know, I've been trying to sit more lately, but ultimately I think too, for me, is my next phase, which I've always been, and I did go a little bit over the holidays last year. But I think for me, part of self-study, svadhyaya, is not just, I mean, yes, we can honestly and objectively look at ourselves, but I can justify anything that I do pretty easily, you know? I think for me, the next phase of that sort of evolution and growth is actually going to therapy, which is something that I have been sort of not thinking that I've ever needed my whole life. I'm like, I don't need that. I know who I am. Like, you know, and yoga helps, but like really, I think that's important for me right now too, because I know that it's still there. It doesn't just, you can't just yoga away your trauma. I mean, it helps, but it is kind of like putting a Band-Aid on something that's bigger, you know? And so it really just depends on the extent of your trauma. I will say I'm not anxious. I haven't, since I started practicing regularly, I haven't had a single panic attack. I get anxious, but it's not just regular anxiety. It's not like chronic anxiety, and, you know, depression comes and goes, you know, it's not like I'm a depressed individual. I'm really pretty happy, but like sometimes you go through phases where you're just like, you don't want to, you know, you're just like, you know, and so there's still underlying stuff, but really, you know, that's, I think, the journey of yoga is like, it's really learning how to understand ourselves better and why we do the things that we do, and
Sure.
And to really heal ourselves. And I mean, I know yoga is definitely always going to be a part of this healing process for me. I mean, it is meditation, all of this, but I also think, like, you know, certain times you need to, like, trained professionals can be helpful, you know? And so that's where I'm kind of at right now, is just sort of trying to be a little more preventative. Hopefully, you know, this will never happen again in the future, you know, but the potential is always there, you know? And so I just got to be sort of vigilant about, because I know that about myself, you know, I know it can become a very slippery slope, very easily just kind of drifting into something that I don't want to be doing, you know? And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. But, you know, all in all, other than just little hiccups along the ride, my life has been really great. I mean, I feel blessed. I feel lucky, so lucky that this is what I get to do day in and day out. I have not, in almost 10 years of teaching, gotten sick of showing up. And you know, I realize that every time I walk into a room to teach, that there is, especially with a bigger class, or, you know, more people, there's going to be one person in that room that was like me that day, where I was like, oh crap, like I'm dying in here. And, you know, and so I always shoot from the hip in my classes. I mean, I've told my students, I'm pretty forthcoming about everything that's happened to me. I mean, I don't want to like pile crap on my students, but people know, and I put it out there to just try to hold myself accountable still, you know. But I know that the opportunity is there to change somebody's life, just like through yoga, just like yoga changed my life. In fact, I know one person who did my training that was very similar to me. He's now like, I was like Matt Capinas. I was like to Matt Capinas. He's like to me. He was like, he always showed up to my class, and then he pulled me aside and he was just like, you know, you get these texts and emails from time to time that people who really appreciate what you said or anything that you did, because it really helped them through something in that moment. And he was in that space, and he took the training with me when I was leading it at Cherry Creek, and he's off to the races now in Denver West, you know, and I'm just watching him from afar do his thing. And, you know, and so that's the ripple effect right there, you know, and that's how I try to treat it when I show up. I try to speak when I walk into a class. I'm usually not overly positive. I mean, I am positive. I make jokes. I'm happy. But like, I like to speak to the person that's having the worst day in the room. I feel like if I talk about something that's a little harsh, about death, about whatever it is, if people are up here feeling good about their day, I'm not going to knock them down that much, but the potential to lift somebody up that's on the other end of that spectrum that particular day is worth it. Like that's who I try to speak to in any class, is the person that's struggling the most in there. And that's why, it's like, yeah, we feel better, and we do, happiness does come with practicing regularly, but it's not, happiness is not born out of doing yoga. It's, I think, I don't know, it's an inside job, and really, yeah, I just try to not be overly positive. I know if when I first started showing up, there's another teacher out there that I taught at another studio for a good while, who basically drove it home to me that, yoga's come as you are, and you don't have to feel good to show up to do yoga. You don't have to, and she was really all about it. And I know that if I would have shown the first kind of days I showed up to yoga, then it wasn't that guy who was just kind of calm and at peace. And it was somebody that was just like saying how wonderful life was and how great everything was. Rainbows and unicorns, I probably would have just rolled up my mat, walked out, and never come back. It was like, I know how it feels to be in that space when you're feeling like that and everybody seems happy and you're the one person that doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically, one of my missions is to just try to talk to that person, And I get texts all the time. People always say, man, I can't believe, thank you for saying that, or whatever it is. And, and like I said, I just try to shoot from the hip and not try to sugarcoat anything and just say, this is how it is. And then once you start feeling better, then you start diving down whatever, like all the other avenues that yoga opens up for us.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, as a teacher, because when you start teaching, there's automatically this thing where they want to look up to you. They want to like learn from your experience, and they kind of put you on a pedestal. And
Right.
It's difficult because you're like, hey, I mean, especially when I was a brand new teacher, I'm like, I don't know anything. Like, I just am showing up, but I would, just like you said, I would get these texts where people would be like, wow, what you said today in class really hit home for me. And I'm like, I don't even remember what I said because I just blacked out and like was trying to teach the sequence, But it is that ripple effect. And that's for me the most rewarding part of like knowing that setting the space for somebody and allowing them to pick whichever aspects of my class that they want can change their life and make it their own experience. And that's magical. And I don't think I knew that going into teaching that was going to be a byproduct,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I love that you offer a different perspective maybe than a lot of other yoga teachers, because it really is, it's personal to who you are as an individual, because all of us have chosen to teach because of our own practice first and what that's done for our lives. And obviously you're not going to reach everyone in a studio anytime you're in there, but at some point we have a responsibility to teach and to guide and show what we have to offer. And it's a great perspective. I love it. I don't think most people come to it with that platform, which is so nice. And a lot of people do come to yoga because they have trauma or they're trying to heal from something, and they need teachers like that understand and can be there. I was listening to this episode of something the other day that said like 30% of Americans suffer from anxiety, and anxiety's considered like a mental illness, and a lot of it's from trauma and like PTSD. And meditation and exercise and therapy are like the tools that rate almost as high as medication for treating some of the most severe cases.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when you're talking about panic attacks and stuff, it's that concept of like, we have this breath that we never even think about. We never even register until we
whatsoever.
like we either can't catch our breath or we step into yoga and somebody tells you to breathe a certain way. Like my first yoga class, I was like, well, I'll do everything but the breath, because don't tell me how to breathe, but once you learn, I mean, that is your gateway into all the other aspects of the practice. And you're a prime example of what yoga can do for somebody.
There's so much science behind it, but really the proof is in the pudding. I know if I can keep people there long enough to just, especially as newer students, like somebody new to yoga, if you can just keep them there long enough, they're gonna feel the effects of it.
Yes.
It's like, you don't need to know the science behind it. It's there, if you do it. And so, yeah, I do keep my classes lighthearted. I'm not just like the depressing yoga teacher.
Have you had people complain or get mad at you because of your class?
I not that much. I've had a couple, I think, instances where somebody said something, and but by and large, no. I mean, most of the time, I've had a few complaints, but not too many. And your students will find you. I mean, people, it's like there's, people are always like, well, isn't the yoga market saturated? And yes, there's a lot of yoga studios, a lot of teachers, but every teacher has something unique to bring to the table,
Sure.
And so your students will find you. People, I know, there's a lot of people that just don't like what I say and do, and so they go to another class, and that's okay. Like, you don't take that personally, but like the people that do resonate with you will keep coming back,
Yeah.
And that's the great thing. I mean, there's so many different ways to approach this practice. There's so many different ways to speak about this practice. I mean, it's kind of endless how you can approach the practice of yoga. And that's what one of the really beautiful things about it is it's like, there's so many possibilities in how to transmit this information to others and to have people embody it and all of these other things,
Well, and there's still so many people not practicing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why, Maj-Lis and I met in teacher training, and we clicked immediately, and over food, because we like to eat.
True.
And yoga, of course.
And she laughed at my jokes, even if they were bad.
Yeah. And humor. But it was at that time that we had a conversation over lunch where I said, you should open a studio and I'll run it and we can do this thing together. And as we really started to dive into why we were doing it, it's because there's still so many people who don't practice yoga. And I wanted to ask you, when your doctor prescribed yoga and you were like, no way, what was it? What did you think yoga was, or what was it about it that you didn't?
I literally thought it was like, the Hare Krishnas on the Pearl Street Mall. I was like,
Wow.
I was traumatized by those guys when I was a kid. They handed me something that was like reincarnation based, and I was like, oh my God, this is a horrible image, but it was so new age to me. And I grew up in Boulder. I grew up with my best friend growing up. His family was very Buddhist. I think like there was sort of a little bit of that came in because I've never really been to church in my life. My mom didn't make me go to church. She like basically just bailed on Catholicism once she moved from Boston. But like I did have a little bit of Buddhist influence, and I always thought that my friend's family was weird. I'm like, these guys are weird. They don't eat sugar. What the hell? They don't have a television. Let's spend the night at my house, And but like even up until I was, quite old, I thought yoga was something just very new agey and very just out there that I had no idea what it was. I had no idea, and I grew up here, So it's like, I don't know. There's so many people that could be introduced to the practice that could be, served by it,
How many classes a week do you teach right now?
Right now I have 9 regular classes. My magic number is 12. I think I like to teach 12 classes a week. I did teach in Denver for quite a few years. Those classes, I lost those classes about a year or so ago. So I lost a few classes. So I haven't had a full schedule in almost a year, like what I consider a full schedule. So it's been a little bit of this last year, a little bit of a hustle for me, where I used to just have, my 12, 13 or 14 classes, at 14 for a while, and then I shaved it down to 12, but I never subbed classes out and I never picked classes up. I was just very consistent to my classes. Now I've been having to like jump in and just try to sub classes and stuff just to sort of, fill that gap, which is it's nice, but I like structure. So it's also like, I'd like to just have a full schedule, but it is nice to be able to sort of jump in times where I wouldn't normally be there. I get to meet people that I wouldn't meet otherwise. And, but yeah, I teach 9 regular. Right now I'm in the middle of a teacher training as well. So, I do lead the teacher training or co-lead. But yeah, 9's where I'm at. And,
There's a lot of, we have a lot of teachers at Yoga Pod here in Fort Collins who teach full time.
nice.
And I don't think people who don't teach yoga don't understand what that lifestyle is like. Is, you always are bringing something fresh to the studio. You're always switching up the music. You're always giving 100% of yourself, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. A lot of teachers travel from studio to studio. Have you been teaching, just solely teaching yoga and doing trainings for 10 years?
Yep. Yeah. Much.
And what is that like for you? I know it's a hustle a lot of times, and that's
hustle.
kind of a sad thing when you think about what we offer to.
Yeah. Well, and I will agree with you that, people like, I had a girlfriend once who just was like, oh, she didn't get how much output. Like, she kind of thought I was just like, standing around, just running around with my, whatever. And I'm like, it's harder than you think, like, trust me, like, if you were to do this, I know people that have wanted, like, it's a lot of output. And so I definitely agree that, many people don't understand how much we do give, but, I just love it. I've had jobs that, I've done a lot of things in my life, a lot of like customer service. I did a lot of construction and masonry work. And, at that point in my life, I was like, it was great to work outside, all these different things. But I kind of love just having not like a set schedule and being able to have more freedom, more freedom in my day and more freedom in my life, but you do have to sometimes hustle to make ends meet, which is unfortunate, but yeah, if you love what you do, and that's not to say that you shouldn't make good money doing something that you love that you do, but I've done plenty of things that I've been not passionate about at all, and so I don't think I would trade it for the world. Having sort of the opportunity I have right now, I don't think there's any sort of price tag that would, well, there's probably a price tag that would, but
everybody has a price.
I love what I do. And for me, that's like a large portion of it, is just being passionate about what I'm doing and combining what my love is with my work. Like, that's my wish for everybody on this planet, is to do what they love to do and somehow try to incorporate it into a means to make a living. Like, that's like the win-win for everybody, is to be able to do what you love to do day in and day out. And especially with yoga and things that are a little more on the creative, or can be on the creative side, there's the possibilities are endless. You can do you can kind of choose your own adventure, and so, yeah, it's a little bit of a hustle, but I love the hustle. So, yeah.
So maybe we wrap with this because I think we're at about time. But is there anything that you do that kind of fills you up, or do you feel like there are things that you need to do to kind of fill up?
My other passion right now is my bike. I ride my bike a lot. That's sort of like church for me, is just getting
Sure.
on my bike and riding. I would like to do a little more traveling, I think. I'm a home-based person, but I would like to get some trips in somewhere, or, take just a vacation. I think even though my life is kind of like a mini vacation in a lot of respects, that you still got to sometimes step away from even what you love to do and just take a break and step away from it. I mean, I went for years and years with never even taking a day off. I was just like, this is what I'm doing, but I love what I'm doing, but you got to like be careful there, because then, you don't want to burn yourself out. And so
Sure.
maybe 2 trips. And then, I think therapy will do me some justice, like just kind of start diving into that realm. And I think that too will actually add to my teaching, just my ability to teach other people is taking it to that next level of understanding.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's great. Well, I'm excited to come down to Boulder and take a class from you.
Yeah, we should do that. We
Sure.
should
Field
take a
trip.
field trip.
Yeah, that'd be really fun.
Practice.
And then you can ride your bike to Fort Collins and
Yeah.
take a class.
I did that, and when I taught in Denver, I rode my bike to Denver quite often, Boulder to Denver.
Oh man,
That's
yeah.
wild.
Yeah, that was fun. It was like made my life that was like, it was amazing. It was like I felt so good,
That's
That's
great.
great.
I would like to go teach yoga.
Right on.
Anyway,
thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
Pleasure.
nice to hear your story and share that. And I think my hope is somebody listens to this and who didn't think they could do yoga, that has challenging issues in their life, and they say, hey, he did it, he can
and it worked.
change his life. This stuff works. And
Yeah, it does.
and that's my hope, is someone's inspired by that. So
yeah.
Well, it was great to chat with you guys, and thanks for having me on. And hopefully, my nephew just started at CSU, so
awesome.
maybe I'll be up in your neck of the woods here soon, and I'll pop in.
That'd be
We'd
awesome.
Awesome.
love to have you in.
Yeah,
Right on.
that'd be
Thanks,
so
Rob.
great. Thank
Thanks,
you so
Rob.
much.
All right. Bye.
Namaste.